This episode was sponsored by Property, the leading real estate agent for all real estate transactions with a comprehensive ecosystem. They combine highly trained experts with the latest technologies on an intelligent platform to provide clients, brokers, and service partners with risk-free, flexible, and simplified services. Learn more at property.com. That's property with an I.com.
Is a lot more powerful than whatever you could tell them. And for this, I think you need collaboration. And I think it depends on your modality. VNew is so new, so novel, so different that people would kind of have some adversities if they really hadn't seen it working. And if you do something that they do internally as well, then I think the game is very different. You need to be more cautious. Will they copy easily? I think then it's a different game. But I also think there, you cannot be naive. I think the big companies, they have a lot of capabilities to do their recook and so, and they will do that. But I also think if you have no openness at all to interact and discuss, I think if you're hiding everything because you're afraid, it's very difficult to have a good discussion. And I think there is a trade-off that depending on what you do, you have to balance.
Yeah, it's a real act of balance to find how much you disclose and how much you try to protect.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Sylvan.
Simon, welcome back to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest again.
Thanks very much, Sylvan.
You're the CEO and co-founder of T3 Pharmaceuticals, where you developed the next generation bacterial cancer therapy. Before we talk about that, it has been a while since you've been on the show. Last time, how have you been? I feel a lot of stuff has happened since then.
Yeah, a lot has happened. And I mean, to put it very short, I would say I've been busy and happy. I would say in the meantime. So a lot has happened. So busy times, but I would also say, I mean, a lot of luck on the way, a lot of good events. So overall, happy time.
We talk about a lot has happened and happiness.
I hope so.
If you ran into Simon in 2021, your former version of yourself, what recommendation would you give to him? What tip would you give to him?
I found that a very hard one. I would say the big advantage of being in the future is that I know that some things have materialized in the meantime. And for me, caring about the project always means also worrying. And probably that's the most I would say. I mean, try to worry a little less. Yeah. It will go well. And I think other than that, I think the attitude we had at the time is the same attitude we have now. And I consider that being the appropriate one. So you need to care, and with that you need to worry to some extent, but I would try to cut the peaks a little.
I was wondering, isn't worrying just part of the journey?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you can't avoid it, that's for sure.
That's the entrepreneurial life in that sense.
It is.
So before we talk about your very impressive acquisition story, let's tackle a bit more about what you actually do. So to give people who might not have fully listened to the first episode a bit more context. So you actually... What progress did you make from 2021 since we last spoke until today? Because I think in your field, even where things take a bit longer than in the software business, a lot can happen in these years. So what was the progress that you made over the last time?
I would say essentially on our first product, what we have made compared to 2021 is that we have launched a clinical trial. So I think it's the first product is in testing in humans. I think that's a big progress, which I think co-validates a lot of you check a lot of cross check boxes by that. Yeah. And then I think essentially we have widened the platform technology. So we started with the platform. We had one product that kind of moved on. But then I also think we have kind of built like a second platform. And that has been moving ahead and has shown good results in more earlier space.
Amazing. And you treat cancer until before T3 Pharmaceuticals existed. You often would do a chemotherapy, etc. Why were these more conventional, more traditional methods not the best solutions? What did you differently? What were the drawback of these existing solutions?
I would say, still today for a lot of cancers, there is chemotherapy is the standard of care. So it still has its place. I would say the downside is that is very little targeted or not at all. And I think is there where we really want to, first of all, set the difference that we have a lot of action, but only where we want the action to take place. And then I think we more work on the immune system mode of action rather than just destroying cells. I think that's where we see that the differentiation. And then since it's a living entity, the bacteria, they're alive. So I think they have it brings some complexity, but I also think it brings some big chances for improved treatment.
In what sense? That you have like less side effects, for example, for patients?
I would say that's clearly the hope, that through accumulation, only where it's supposed to be, it should have less side effects or more short-term side effects. That is clearly something we're working on. But I would say from a patient perspective, the most important may be that you have more impact. And that's clear. I mean, chemotherapy, as I said, is still widely used. It works. And so that's a challenge to be taken. And that's where we're working on.
So you mentioned the important role of the bacteria. How do you exactly work with that? What do you do differently compared to a chemotherapy?
I mean, what we do is we engineer live bacteria, and one aim is to make them specific for solid tumors. So this bacteria is supposed to die everywhere else, while in solid tumors, they're supposed to survive and then they grow. And that means you have kind of a self-amplifying modality. So it's not what you give is the max you ever have, but it can get more and more. And I think what we aim at is to engineer it in a way that it becomes only more within the tumor. And there are really a lot more, that we have really many, many, many bacteria on site. And then we also engineer them to manufacture compounds that they would then release on site. And I think that's the second kind of feature, that we do have a living entity that you can kind of a small factory, you can get it on site and then you deliver.
Amazing. And I'm sure over the past 3 to 4 years since the first episode that we did, you also faced some challenges along the way, right? You said you were worrying, maybe even a bit too much. So what were you worrying about? What were the challenges that you faced during the past years?
I think we must acknowledge that it's fairly new technology and is not the standard. So I would say if you go towards a clinical trial, from the regulations, not everything is well defined. And I think that brings certain hurdles, because you're forced to define, there is a certain unclarity on how you kind of manufacture, how do you prove X, Y, Z. And I think it's also a chance, as always, it's a chance to define it the way that is most appropriate. But I think there you face unclarity, it's difficult to plan, and then, how you execute, how fast will you be? And I think that have clearly been challenges on the way to how to get really a product on its way.
I assume that's something that many similar startups face, that's just the biggest challenge that you have to solve, basically.
Yeah. It's just new. And I think that brings upside and it brings downside. And I think you have to try to well control those unclarities so that you have a certain planability and that you can meet your milestones. And I think that you're somewhat forced to. And I think with all the complexity from the regulators, from the guidelines, from that unclarity, I think there is a lot of wiggle room. And but I think it has all worked out well. I think we had good guidance, we had good knowledgeable people, we had good interaction with authorities. So I think, we could define the path, but it wasn't clear from the start how it would really be.
It turned out pretty well, I would say. You sold your company for 450 million Swiss francs. Was an exit always the goal that you were striving for?
Let's say I would say answer it in two parts. In one part, I would say we always knew that at some point something would kind of have to happen to make it really a global thing. And what that really would be, I at least did not have a very tangible, solid idea up to some point where we had seen like Amal being acquired by Boehringer. We looked at some other deals and we saw, that can really happen. And that's then a way how it can go on. And I think there we benefited also from, let's say, our chairman. We had people in the surrounding that had sold companies before. So it was somewhere back on our head, on our radar. And then I think at some point it started being, or that the idea of how this could become and how it could really be became way more tangible.
I mean, you also had investors on board, right? Because you had to finance all your operations and the
Absolutely, yes.
development. So they want to see a return at one point in time. So either you go bust and it doesn't work, or you probably have to sell or become really big yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's the deal.
Yeah. I think at some point it was either it's like an acquisition, is a big, I mean, and licensing deals in the biotech, I would say, is the path to IPO. Usually you have one licensing deal, then you have some others, and then at some point and I think there I saw even more complexity and like fractionation. And there we did much rather prefer like I would say simple. I mean, simple solution is clear, is clarity.
And you said it was in the back of your heads that, okay, eventually we will have to maybe sell. There has to be an acquisition. When did that become a really real possibility? Who approached whom? Was it you approaching Boehringer, or did they approach you? How did that turn out?
I mean, importantly, I must maybe say that since 2018, we had been in contact with the Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Fund. And then 2019, they became one of our like cornerstone investors. And so we had been in contact with the BI Venture Fund. And I think at some point, we then got also in contact with some scientists. And I think that was really when we developed that new platform, if you wish. So then I tried to understand what about that development would be most interesting for major pharma. We talked to several major companies, and all of them essentially said the same further development would be very interesting.
Nice.
And then we kind of started to have collaborations with some of the companies, and among them was Boehringer. And I think that's where we really got to know also I would say the corporate world. I mean, and some of the scientists, and we had a very good collaboration over a few years. And I think that was kind of a very fruitful period scientifically. So we really went ahead with the technology, and probably also that kind of helped us to understand, I mean, you know, how is the company? How do they do? What kind of scientists are working there? And probably very much vice versa.
So it was sort of a getting to know each other phase in that sense.
Yeah.
I wonder, you heard this feedback from multiple companies, but then to actually develop the solution in that direction, weren't you afraid to work closely with these companies that they wouldn't just do that on their own? Or were you well protected enough through patents, etc., that this was not even possible?
I mean, let's say we knew that we were fairly well protected. We knew that what we do, I mean, with our bacteria is so exotic that I'm aware that all of the big ones, they can do that.
Right.
But they have to build a separate unit. I mean, they cannot just say to some scientists, do that. They say, what the hell is this? How you really do? And so we knew, let's say, that the entry barrier to get it done on their own was fairly high. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it seemed a lot, because we were approachable, it was a lot easier to do it together with us because we were open to do that. We were clearly fairly stringent on the terms. We can say that because we had that same discussion already. I think it was 2017-18 with another major company, where we had kind of the same idea, and then the terms where we didn't judge it being like good enough, and then we just decided to do it on our own. Yeah. And I think we always had that backing from the investors, from our board, that, I mean, we trust that this is a good idea. I mean, let's just get started. And I think that was very helpful because we had some years of tech development when we then approached the people again. Mm-hmm. And then they all said, kind of, that's the good thing to do. We had already started, so we had some data to show. And then I think we could also then we had there was already something to show, and we could say, I mean, we're ready to do it together with you, but we're not going to give it to you. I mean, you know, you're going to see, but we're not going to let control go. And I think that was very important, that also there we had a very clear mindset on what is a deal that kind of is fruitful for T3 Pharma and what maybe not. And I think we would only do in case we would get what we felt was appropriate. And I mean, for some it took a while to convince, for some a little less. And then I think once we had the start, it was, I would say legally, it was so clear that it was very beneficial for the scientific collaboration, that it was so clear that we didn't have to worry that much. And that I felt was a big plus.
The collaboration or point you mentioned for 2017, 2018, was that an acquisition offer, or was that also scientific
collaboration? No, that
was
a scientific collaboration.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think with our modality, because it's so new and people have very little kind of tangibility on it, for me, it was always, I knew that people will have a lot of questions. Some people may like it, but then it's kind of, I mean, is it really as good as they say? And for me, the wish was always that the scientists on the other side, they would start using it, and then they would see the data. And this is a lot more telling than you kind of doing a nice pitch. I always wanted their scientists to test it and say, oh my God, it's good.
I love that. The data speaks for itself.
It's a lot more powerful than whatever you could tell them. And for this, I think you need collaboration. And I think it depends on your modality. VNU is so new, so novel, so different that people would kind of have some adversities if they really hadn't seen it working. And if you do something that they do internally as well, then I think the game is very different. You need to be more cautious. Will they copy easily? I think then it's a different game. But I also think there, you cannot be naive. I think the big companies, they have a lot of capabilities to do their recook and so, and they will do that. But I also think if you have no openness at all to interact and discuss, I think if you're hiding everything because you're afraid, it's very difficult to have a good discussion. And I think there is a trade-off that depending on what you do, you have to balance.
Yeah, it's a real act of balance to find how much you disclose and how much you try to protect. So it all started with this scientific collaboration. When did the talks then shift from, okay, we work together on the scientific part to, hey guys, we would like to acquire you?
I mean, we tried to build a certain momentum, we must also say, and we tried to probably have a one point in time where several good things could come together. And that for me was when this new platform started delivering good data. And then we knew that people are going to see it. And then I think with being a clinical company, we also knew, I mean, that is a certain standing. And that we felt it was kind of a good point in time where people know, I mean, if we now move ahead, we may create a lot of further value. And this kind of a tipping point. And I felt that there it was somewhat we managed to make people aware that, I mean, you know, either we go for a next fundraising, we will increase the price. And then there is some upcoming near inflection points. And, you know, if we're a bit lucky there, suddenly the price tag may significantly change. And I think that has been, you know, I'm always afraid of these artificial kind of
negotiation tactics.
Yeah,
right?
If everyone knows it's an artificial timeline, it feels like very poor to me. And so I would say since we had multiple companies that we were talking to, and since we really had some key inflection points of the technology and that in parallel on multiple kind of axes, I really felt it was very natural. It was honest and it was transparent and people knew. And so I think that was really kind of giving the boost to at least test the waters and then move it to the next stage. And there also, I think we knew what we were going for. Then I think that, you know, that's why I say at that point of time, there was a very tangible idea for us where we would want it to be. Yeah. And we knew we don't want to have a very cumbersome, so it should be clarity again. I think we have been benefited from that legal clarity for the collaborations. And again, I think with an acquisition or with the legal setup for the future, we were also looking for clarity and ease and not complexity that you would always have to say, oh, can we use that? No, because this is still relates to, and these kind of legal splits we didn't seek. I mean, people that work with me, they know I'm an enemy of complexity. I try to avoid complexity unless you really need it and you know you're having a big upside. Otherwise, maybe I'm just too stupid, but I try to keep it simple. It just helps your life. If it's clear, everyone knows. And I think with that communication line, with the data emerging, with the good collaboration we had with the Boehringer Ingelheim Venture Fund over many years, I think then that, let's say, scientific collaboration we had over like 1-2 years, I think they could guess who we were, or they had a deep insight in what's our way of functioning, what's the technology like, what's the people like. And then with the coming data, I think that was probably a good point in time to have an even closer look.
I love the part about simplicity because I feel it takes way more effort to make something simple than making it complex, because it takes effort to take words away from a sentence and still say something very precisely.
Yes, but I also think it's important as a founder to be aware of what is it that you want. And I think if you go out and you're unclear or you haven't made, let's say, your alignment with your key investors, and I mean, would that be appropriate? Would people agree to that? I mean, it's not your decision as a founder. There are people involved. And I think you need to make sure that there is an alignment on where you go. That would really work out. And you also need an alignment if they propose you something else, that saying no is okay.
Of course.
And I think with that, you're a true negotiation partner. People can rely on what you say And there is no way to then change. And then I think then it's easy. Again, it's easy. If you say, oh my God, we're not going to go that path. People know, okay, that has been an alignment, is a no. We find another way, or we stop. And I think that, again, also there, I think simplicity, transparency.
Important.
Yeah, sure, yes.
I want to talk about sort of strategic options that you had back then. You had strong data coming in, right? So you saw, okay, now we're sort of at an inflection point. And then you decided, okay, we have the alignment. We do want to sell the company, but you had multiple options, right? You could have said, we want to sell, or we want to continue on our own and try to scale that on a global scale on ourselves, etc. Why was selling the right decision for you guys? How did you find that internal alignment with you, with the investors, etc. first? Because you could also say you leave a lot of potential on the table if you sell now versus the value you could capture 5 years from now.
I mean, I would say for me, there is two important angles to that. The first is the technology. And for me, it was clear we want to have a deal that accelerates the technology. And this we have very early on felt with Boehringer. I mean, they understand the technology, they understand the chances, and they understand the risks. So we knew that to bring it further to the next level, they will help us a lot. With their know-how, with their capabilities, they will boost us.
It's a bit like a leverage in that sense.
So for the technology, it felt like, oh, okay, great, we're going to the next level. We can accelerate. Monetary-wise, I mean, for me, it's a pure question of greed. Because, I mean, that maybe going to the next big milestone is a risk of not reaching. And we all know that if you don't reach, I mean, you need to juggle, you need to find the interim financing, and then and it all takes years, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And of course, then the price tags, you get zeros at the back, sure. But there, I just felt, I mean, from a personal perspective, this is more than you could ever dream of.
Of course.
I also think from a biotech perspective, it's just a reasonable number. It's comparable. It's okay.
I mean, the stakes are also incredibly high, right? It's like if you get to that stage, your impact you can have on the world and bring to a company like Boehringer, we talk about billions,
yes,
right?
Let's say I dare to say that I slightly anticipate the complexity ahead if you really want to have a global supply chain and you want to supply the world as fast as possible once you get approvals. I mean, this complexity to build it up on your own, I think is stupid to admit that we would be able to do that without significant delays. Mm-hmm. And if we would ever have been able to do it, I don't know. I mean, if that would have been the only option to continue, we would have gone for it. That's for sure. Yeah. But still, then I felt it's a bit maybe too arrogant, or is a bit too little of humbleness to say, no, we're going on our own, we take the risk. And I felt it was a good point in time. And now seeing a bit behind the curtain of a large pharma, I mean, that sense I already had then that it needs a lot for such a deal to happen. And I really think you need very good reasons if you have good money and you have a good partner, essentially, to refuse. No. I really think you need... I mean, either the terms are crap and then you know why you don't do it. But if the terms are good and the partner, I mean, is the best partner you can imagine, why would you not do it? It felt like, at some point, if you want to get the family, you need to marry. Otherwise, you need to find your wife or husband or your
partner. You need
partner.
to settle down, yeah.
At some point, you need to decide. Yeah. And you can always say, oh man, maybe the next day I meet. No, I think at some point you need to say. And I think there also we have been very transparent in the process. At some point, we really felt these are good people. They know what they're doing. They're transparent. They have always been respectful. We see that they can help us in getting technology as far as we want to. I mean, then you can be transparent. I mean, we would select you. I think you can be fair, but doesn't mean that you will accept anything.
Of course.
But you can say, I mean, what we see, we like.
Did you also talk to other companies along the process?
Did. Yes.
I mean, you sort of have to, but you also don't really want to, right? It's a bit of mixed feeling.
Probably for the momentum, I think it gives you credibility if people know that you talk to others, and you can. But I think in tendency, people overdo it. I think they have the feeling that they constantly need that pressure. I think at some point, when people are aware that you're professional and you can go elsewhere if you want to, then I think it's also fair to say, I mean, we like you. as a company. I think what we have seen, we're very convinced about you. We see that going well. And I also think then you need to take the side, flip the side and see, those people in the large corporates, they spend a lot of money and resources. And at some point, they also want to have a certain clarity that if they stick to the path they have chosen, that you're also going to stick.
Of course.
And I felt that, at least I hope, it's always difficult to speak for the others, but I felt that there we were in a way predictable and we were sticking to what we said. And I think that has been important because that gave the other side also the confidence that if they do not leave a certain zone or path, we will also stay. Yeah. And I think throughout we have been there and we still are.
I take away 3 very important things you said. You built the relationship over a long term to really get to know each other, work with the scientists, with the venture arm to really know, is this a good fit? You had momentum, so you had the good timing aligned with strong data, and you had options to walk away, credible options that you were not with a back to the wall where you said, it's this or we're dying.
I think we can also admit that we had very good luck with our investors that we had from the very start, because I think they were supporting us through many years. And I think it was credible also to the outside world that they would keep on supporting.
And that's really important.
Yeah, I think
otherwise you say, no, we will continue to invest. Nope, I want to sell.
Yeah, and I think that was credible. I had no doubt, I must say, that those people, if it wouldn't have been a fit, we would have been allowed to say no, and we would have found a way jointly to continue. And I think that backing, that people really keep your back, I think that brings you in a very good position. I think that's, and I'm very glad for that. I think you cannot overestimate how much that brings you in a different position of credibility, of really having alternative options. And so I'm very grateful for that. That I think also that was good luck, that we had those people that were very, very constant. They didn't, they walked the talk. And that to me was, that also dampens your worries a lot.
Of course, that's a very good team combination in that sense. And now I have a bit of a provocative question. Of course, 450 million exit, that's a fabulous result for you, for the company, but also for the whole ecosystem. And yet at the same time, we always hear that we need more bigger companies here in Switzerland. We need people who don't sell at the first offer, Do you also feel a bit sad in a sense that you didn't try to push it higher? Because eventually with this great team, with the investors, you might have even reached that. And then instead of selling your technology to a big company, you would build the big company yourself. Of course, that takes way longer, etc. But how do you feel about that? Because it's always a bit a very difficult decision, I envision.
I would say from a patriotic Swiss perspective, I would say if we would have sold the technology just out of country, people would have been fired. That would have been it.
No.
That would have hurt me. Yeah, sure. And I think some of our investors too. That is not what we were actually looking for. But that also, I think in the due diligence of our potential acquirer, that was part of, we looked at, how do they deal with companies that they have acquired? Yeah. Is it just the satellite still at their location? So, in essence, we're still the same team, same technology, same place. So it's still Switzerland, it's still Basel-Land. It's the same. And so I feel we do create value in Switzerland. And I think that even from a Swiss perspective, the chance, of course, now we're part of a global entity, it's a German company. Don't ask me about all the tax details in the backyard. This is not my cup of tea. Yeah. But I think essentially is that we increase the chance of it succeeding. And I think it will be a Swiss product, but a Swiss-German product. Mm-hmm. And so I see no loss from a Swiss perspective because we just don't hand it over to somewhere else. And that was it.
I see that. I think that's a very fair point. And it's also this sort of balance between impact. You want to reach as many positive people as possible, right? And there, a big company like that can really boost you compared to doing it yourself, where you might have zero impact if the plan doesn't work out.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there, we had always been seeing the chances of our technology. We're convinced about it, but still, I think you need to be humble enough to know the odds, to know that also that there is failure and that things can go terribly wrong, and then it costs a lot of money to get back. And I just think that knowing that, I think that for me is also with the entrepreneurship is that balance between, knowing that so many do fail and still you're convinced about your technology and your edge and your chance. Yeah. And it's a bit of a balance. But I think in weighing, in balancing those important decisions, I still think taking a bit of a helicopter view and saying, really, don't fall in love too much with your technology. Take a step back. Also be humble about the challenge. See the potential you get in a collaboration, in a close collaboration. And I think that in the end was an easy decision.
It also sounds that the offer was almost a bit too good to let go of, because everyone seems to make money. Boehringer gets a great technology, a great team, and the odds of going even further into the risk and very long journey, potentially another 5, 10, maybe even 20 years, it was maybe just not worth it compared to what was on the table.
For me, that, let's say, the solution as it was so good that at the moment, but that's what I say. I think if you go out, you need to know where you want to land. And I think then if you land there, for me, there was no hesitation at all. Yeah. Zero. I was just very glad that we could materialize, but I didn't have any signs of regrets or kind of doubts. No, not a single second.
The spot where you wanted to land, was it where you landed now, or did you have a higher, lower, or exactly sort of that amount of acquisition in mind?
I would say my expectation had been lower. I knew, because we had that trust building, I had a certain imagination and a tangible feeling of how the people were and how it was functioning. Still, I came from academia. I had never been exposed to major pharma companies. So I thought, there will be way more complexity and it's going to be sometimes difficult. And there I must say the last over a year has very positively surprised me in that sense that what they had promised and what I had assumed that has always held true. And I feel that we receive a lot of respect and a lot of, let's say, understanding for our way of doing. And I think that is, let's say, I value that a lot. I think it's not given, because the small biotechs, we really do things sometimes a little different than the large entities.
I imagine, yeah.
And so I think it's a very bootstrapped way of doing, because, I never believe we're not smarter, we're not more hardworking. We're a dedicated team, we have a great technology, but the people in the large companies, they're smart, they have dedicated teams, they work day and night, they do a lot of stuff. It's just that I think our ways of decision making and then the risk affinity. We have to bootstrap. We cannot do everything because there is no resources.
Of course.
So you need to strip off and focus on the essence. And that means that you take certain risks, not with the eyes closed, but with the eyes open. And I think that for us is kind of the nature of the game. And I think usually I would say that the larger the organization, the more they will try to reduce the risks from the start.
Makes also sense, right?
Yeah,
from their perspective.
It makes a lot of sense. And this, I must say, is very impressive the way they do that. Scientifically, it's very accurate, it's very sound. But for us, it's just not the way we play. And I think then that you receive that value, that people say, oh my God, we see you do it a little differently. But I think it's for you, that's the right way of approaching. Keep on trucking, keep on pushing like that. Yeah. And I think that's what I wanted, that we have that same mechanism, that same functionality, and we do have it. And so I think that we have remained so much as we were before. I think it doesn't happen by chance. I know that they have intense internal thoughts and discussions around how they want it to be. And so it's well reflected. And I think this you feel. That is not, it's by purpose. It's designed. And this is a wish of some of the people that it's going that way. And I feel that is a high appreciation.
And they also had a few successful acquisitions before that. There is some good track record there too.
That was important for us to see they had that track record before. And I'm amazed to say that I think with every acquisition, they keep on polishing.
No,
and so great. It's not that I think we know how it goes and we stick on doing like we did 10 years before. Yeah. So I think it's on the move and it's very professional.
I also want to talk about the due diligence process, because the unofficial due diligence process started a long time ago when you started with the VC arm and the scientists. But how did the official due diligence, when you really entered into this M&A process, How did that look like and go? Because usually that's a very, very intense period. You have to go through due diligence and you still have to run a company, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it was a tough year, 2023. That I can really witness. So I think because essentially on our side was Christoph, the CSO, and me, and the rest was not allowed to know. Yeah. I mean, of course, then at some point they sense a bit, but they didn't know. And I would say at the peak of the due diligence, probably on the other side were triple-digit people, and you're just massively outnumbered. And I think that but again, I was always respectful. It was very professional. It was so well organized and orchestrated from their side. And so I think it was, on a personal level, it was always very friendly, respectful. We had good times. We had laughters, and then it's just you work like day and night, and you have the feeling you never get there. But at some point you get there.
It feels endless. And then
it's endless.
What, we're done? What?
No, it's never. I mean, that I can say we usually had our questions we received on a Friday morning. It's the aggregate. I mean, that they did so professionally. Is one person is your main point of contact, and that person kind of aggregates all the questions from the different teams. Mm-hmm. And usually on a Friday, we would get the questions. And then it typically took us Saturday, Sunday work to answer the questions from last Friday. Yeah. I mean, we always had big fun when we were handed over the questions. I mean, the guy said, yeah, I know it's the last thing you're waiting for is another bunch of 80 questions. Here they are.
Of course.
And so we had, everyone knew, I mean, we're doing our best, we're struggling, and it all makes sense. And hang on a second, we're going to do as fast as we can. But it was a challenge, I must say. I think that by the end of the year, you could feel that it was many hours. Yeah. You know why you're doing it. So in a sense but I mean, let's say I also there for me was important that there was always respect, that we had good interactions. And I think that, keeps you very motivated.
And as long as you were still able to share some laughter, it was okay, right?
Yeah, we are good. I mean, that's what I say, that we had sometimes big meetings on site with T3 Pharma. And then the people aside, they didn't know, who was there, what was it about. But then at the end of the day, they said, it seems you had a good time because you were laughing every now and then. I said, yeah, sure.
That's great.
I mean, I think that for me was very important, that it never was on a person-to-person level. Was always there was a good communication. It was a lot of it was a good time still.
Amazing. And when you're so outnumbered, you work with a huge corporate with thousands of employees, and then you as a small startup, so to speak, 2 people mainly working on the deal. Did you work with any M&A advisors or someone who helped you to work through all these questions and material, etc.? Or how do you structure that?
Our chairman, he has sold some companies before, so he had a lot of insight. But I would say essentially, we refrained from having like a professional advisor that would shield us in a sense. So we wanted to be tangible as we are. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because, you asked me before, how was the due diligence process? And because I anticipated that I will have to answer that also from the other side, yesterday night, I texted the message to that person, was the one point of contact, and said,
nice.
Hey guy, because I have to answer the question, can you please tell me, how was it for you? And I think it was, there you also said, we have been transparent, professional, friendly, fast, responsive, and it was good to hear that. I think it was very mutual, the way we interacted.
Amazing. But I feel like for this volume of a transaction to not work with someone on top, that's also a bold move. Like, it means an insane additional work and probably stress load for you as a founder.
Let's say legally in all the financing rounds, and also now in that deal, it was my ambition to fully understand the paper that I proposed to the shareholders and that I'm willing to sign. And so that took me, the lawyers can witness that I ask a lot of questions.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Really
and
good.
I think you can, you may have certain advisors, but I was never ready to hand over responsibility, because for the investors and for the team, I felt personally fully responsible that what is negotiated is okay, is reflected in what is written down, and that we can rely on it for the future. And that kind of responsibility is for me, so tremendous that you may have certain people advising, but I must also admit that I think many aspects we did in a BD perspective, unorthodox way. And I know that some people on the way may have said, like, I mean, Simon, really, that's the way. And like, you know, we never did kind of go out and had a global reach out. Mm-hmm. We had deselected some companies, but then because we felt, I mean, immediately we get so many scientific questions. I don't need to hire a BD guy because he can have the first 10 minutes of a phone call, and then he comes back to us.
Yeah, of
and
course.
We're few people. We cannot serve 100 companies, and we rather serve 2, 3, 4, 5 on time, professional, accurate than 20 in a lousy manner. Oh. And so then we felt, and I also felt it comes a lot with that technology, a lot comes also down to the people. And we need to build trust that we know what we do, that we're reliable, that if they want, we're going to stay on board. We're going to keep on running as long as they want us to. And I mean, this is a lot about how you judge the person. And this you cannot hand over that someone else is going to represent you.
That's true.
And so for me, no, I felt I had sufficient support from some shareholders, from the chairman, from the surrounding, that we felt we were in control. We did understand what it's about. We could put it in perspective. Then we felt like it's okay. But we knew it's a bit uncommon to do it without kind of any kind of bank support. But I mean, in the end, when I asked about what was good here, they also said it's good that you didn't have a BD representative, but it was you.
Yeah.
Because it was tangible, it was direct, we knew. And I think at some point, of course, you lack a bit of experience. It may be, I mean, not unprofessional, but, you know, you lack a bit the background and you may approach things differently. I think that probably was even refreshing. It was always simple.
I love that. I think it's a very refreshing perspective that you bring to the table.
But it's the fun that, I think that was at some point I realized that this is a certain risk that we do it on our way, which I would say is a very personal way that relates a lot to the interpersonal interaction we had. Mm-hmm. And I knew that there is a certain risk with that approach because you can't do it very often. But I also felt that, especially with the companies that we wanted to be acquired by, that this personal level would matter a lot. At least that was my hope. I think it was not wrong. Yeah. It was the right thing. And I'm glad that there I did listen to the judgment, that I had the feeling for them. There was no kind of malus from not being a professional BD person. It was okay the way we were for the size and kind of company we were. Yeah. It was appropriate. It was not a masquerade with something, you know, with the investment bank and some intermediates that would only cost money, create complexity.
It was very authentic what you did.
Yeah, it was straight. It was easy. It was, you know, and I think that kind of proximity, for me, was better.
Amazing.
Together with Talent Cake, Swisspreneur just released its 5th masterclass. This time on how to create the ideal team framework with your co-founders to ensure future success. It's based on Talent Cake's Founders Agreement. We've got Talent Cake's CEO Viviana Groppengieser, Yokoi co-founder Melanie Gabriel, and Scandit co-founder Christoph Roduner giving you their first-hand experience on how to align the goals of everyone in your team, how to split roles and responsibilities, and why equity, vesting, and investment are topics you need to discuss from day one. It's an intense team-forming bootcamp, and it's available for free on our website. Click the link in the show notes to start watching it now.
Let's also talk about these 450 million, the purchase price.
It's up to. That's
true. Up to. How do you reach that agreement? Who did they suggest that? Did they do like their own valuation? Say, hey, this is what we're willing to pay. Did you negotiate it?
Surely you negotiate, and I think importantly. I mean, it sounds very stupid, but you need to find a price that both parties agree to.
Of course.
And I would say that they may have a lot more sophisticated mathematical way of coming to a price. And I think what a small shop you can do is you look at comparable deals, essentially. And then I think you can rate it somewhere. I mean, are you somewhere in that cloud of comparable deals? I mean, comparable technology, comparable indication, comparable stage of the company. And then you get maybe 10, 15, 20 data points where you know, okay, I mean, and some they don't disclose it, but you get an area of where you want to land. And I think the feeling for that area, that is important. so that people understand they cannot fool you. Then, if it's a bit more, a bit less, I think this is...
Then you have the big range set, basically.
Yeah,
then
that's
are we within there or not?
Yeah, and I think that's probably essential what you need to know. And then I think it's a matter of negotiations, how you structure it in all details. I think that you also need to understand your partner, and you need, I think, there you need to be open to where it guides you, but I think you need to have your boundaries.
And the purchase price, these up to 450 million, it was publicly disclosed. What was the motivation behind that?
I would say from our end, the motivation has been that, I would say in biotech, if you see a deal announced from a clinical stage company, as we were at the time, and there is no price tag attached, it gives a bit of the flavor that people have sold it for very little. No. And I think this is also a bit for the ecosystem. That is the feeling that we, especially since we did people they know me, they know we did that a bit unorthodox approach. I wanted to avoid that people thought or could think we were doing a stupid move. Yeah. So I think that was, let's say, our intention to clarify that it's something substantial, and it's not a little thing.
It's certainly a strong message, that's for sure. How do you celebrate the closing of this deal? You, but also the whole team, basically. What did he do?
I mean, let's say with the team, we had the apro the day of the signing. In the evening, we had a dinner with everyone from the two sides that was like heavily involved in the negotiations, and that was cool. I think with the team, then we had like a Christmas dinner only in January. That was a fond memory. With the family, we had 1 weekend off in the mountains. But I mean, we had I don't know what it was, a Thursday or so. I think it was a Thursday. We signed the paperwork, and then we had dinner. Then we went to T3, and then immediately the work of integrating started.
Next
so it was
milestones.
it was seamless. The work continued. And so more than a Friday kids go to school. So anyway, I couldn't take like vacation. So it was 1 weekend. We had a nice weekend with the family. I was looking forward to, but other than that, no, nothing special. I mean, I must say I did also had some lunch breaks or dinners with some of the former investors.
Cool.
Along the weeks and months thereafter. That was very pleasant. That
Absolutely.
I appreciated a lot. Was good moments also to celebrate with the people that had supported us for so long. I think that personally meant a lot to me.
Wonderful. And I'm not sure if you're going to answer the next question, but I have to ask because it's my job. How much did you personally make from that deal?
I'm surely not going to tell you a number. What I can say is that, let's say, considering that I would have worked even in a good job over those many years, it's a lot less than what you can make through such an acquisition, through such a deal. And
which I think is very good, because people sometimes think, oh no, I just need my stable income, my safe job. This does not compare. It's high risk and high reward. So
sure.
If there's a payday, it's a big one.
Yeah. And I think it's almost a political statement. I think if taking such a risk and sticking to it for so many years, and then you have a big payday, and then I think as a founder, you're not well compensated, even also monetary wise. I think something would be deeply wrong with the system.
Absolutely.
And so I think I'm glad to say it's not terribly wrong in Switzerland. System is okay. Yeah.
And what did he do with the money? Did you buy anything for you, for your family? Did you just invest it? Or what did he do once you got the money?
I would say the most important thing that I could get is the biggest luxury is ease of mind around my financial or the family's financial future. Yeah. I think that's the most important thing you get. And I think it depends on your lifestyle and how much that has to be. But I would say I put the money aside essentially is for the kids and is for my ease of mind. But there is no big luxury I was striving for. And that's probably also because it has never been a monetary motivation. I believe that the system needs to reward those achievements also monetary wise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And is fair. But it's not, I don't get up in the morning. If you would have asked me before how many shares you have, no clue. I know in an order of magnitude, it's like this. And you ask me, what's your salary? I don't know. No. The moment I negotiate, then I try to set it to a right range, but then I forget about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's essentially over these many years. I think there is moments you need to negotiate. You need to make sure that you're not forgotten, which I never had to fight for, by the way. But there is moments you discuss. But then in the everyday life, this is not. In the morning, I don't get up and check how many shares. This is not it. And so I think it is an important feature as a motivation to people that go into that risk, that there is a reward and is more money that you can usually make. And so I think that's surely that you cannot underestimate. But then on the fly, there is a lot more things to care about.
Definitely, and luckily so.
Yeah, luckily, yes.
Where were you when the transaction arrived? You know, you probably checked your bank account, or your bank even called you and said, "Sir, what's going on here?"
Yeah, you got the call from your banker with the congratulations.
Okay.
That's for sure. That feels like very odd. Yes.
But when the money arrived, do you remember where you were or how it felt?
No, I know that the banker called me, was calling, and I said, "What the hell is wrong? Why?"
Oh, suddenly they are interested in you.
Yeah.
Huh.
But other than that, no. No,
Okay.
that wasn't. I mean, there is other fond memories I have of the story, but that is not.
No.
Is not that was not deeply engraved in my memory, I must say. Yeah.
I think it goes very well with what you said before. That was just not the main motivation.
No.
And very well so. You completed the exit, and then you and your team decided to stay in the company. And that's where many things could potentially go wrong. So I'm wondering, A, why did you guys decide to stay? And B, how did you manage to now do this integration in a successful way? Because very many acquisitions, they just fail with that very important integration part. And then all the money that was paid for it is, I wouldn't say going to zero, but certainly worth less than what was paid for.
I would say, probably the biggest part of that achievement goes to Boehringer. I think because they wanted us to stay. They also made that transparent early on, that for them in the end it only is an entity if we stay. And that we already said, like, oh my God, okay, that's kind to hear. And that was also a very easy discussion, because we said, we want to stay, you want us to stay, we want to stay. We have an easy discussion here. And I think so a lot of that, the credits go over to them. I think they have a good system on how they handle it, how they integrate. As I said, there is a lot of respect, there is a lot of understanding, a lot of control is left with us. So I would say that I didn't have the feeling that we had to, struggle a lot to keep it the way we are.
No.
And so I think also there, at least what I can say from our side, I always went in with the position, I don't believe that we know better. Let us listen on what they say. Let us listen on what they want. Let us hear their pains. Let's try to serve it if we can. No. And only if we have to open a box that I know is going to block us for 2 years, I will say, please, can we not avoid it because? And so again, I felt a lot of that happens on a personal level. And if you listen, and if you try to understand the stressors of the other person and your will to contribute and your will to explain your situation, I had the feeling those little things where they may have been a disalignment or a misunderstanding, or it hasn't been thought through, we could fairly easily fix.
You'll find each other.
Yes. Yeah.
Did also some stuff change in that regard? Because, okay, you all wanted to stay. They did want you to stay. So that's an easy conversation. But then I'm thinking about budgets, for example, or salaries of people, which are usually a bit lower when you're working in a startup. Did any of that stuff sort of change?
Yeah, I think what had to change from an organization where we can benefit there, we have made an adaptation. I was, for example, very glad that our IT system, we were handling it on our own. And I was always afraid we would be hacked. And how do we do the backup? And it was it's complex, how much money you spend on that. Now we have a large company with a separate unit. They take care of it.
Nice.
We order the laptops. There is a help desk. Thank you. It's great,
Yeah.
And it's professional again. And so I think that, and then also I would say on a scientific level, you have direct access to so many thousand smart people, and it's the same team. There is no confidentiality shield, so we can access, we can exchange. And I think that has kind of the amplifier I had hoped for. So I would say we really try to get a bit the best of both worlds, that wherever you need a large machinery, we try to benefit. They have experts for everything. We try to get those if we need it. And if we're slim and fast, we try to do that just as before. Right. And we're left to do that. And again, I think that they didn't send a SWAT team that would just turn every stone around. I think that is the credit to them. We're very grateful. And I see it as our task, our duty to deliver on that method, to show, to prove with delivery that this is the right way of leaving a satellite work. And this is our duty. I mean, this is my task. Yeah. That's our task.
I have one last question on this integration topic. It's about incentives, because very often that's a very important part of the deal. That's why it's up to 450 million. But also, you now made more than enough money to feed your family and have a very decent life. So I just wonder, what is sort of the incentivization that you put in place after such an acquisition? Because for you, if you get a few more millions after 3 years of delivering milestone A and B, it's probably not going to make a big difference. So I wonder, how strong of an incentive can money still be at that stage?
I mean, for me, the biggest incentive we can have, and I think everyone in our team must feel that really in the heart, is that you want to get the technology out to the patients. And now with Boehringer being our big brother, we have the chance of achieving. And that's where we have to go. And we just have the chance of doing it. And I think if you don't feel that, then I think a bit more bonus or less, you will just not do it. And I think it's good that we make sure people are well paid. I think that's important. But I think incentivization is that we can still take decisions on the technology. We're in the driver's seat of pushing things ahead. I mean, we're responsible for achieving our targets, but we can decide. And I think this scientific judgments and everyday decision making, I think that's so important. That for me is the big incentive, that we know the people, everyone from the smallest technician to the CEO, everyone must know that if I give an input and it works biologically, we are going to do it.
Yeah. So you have clear, still like performance targets that you want to achieve. And I think that's really important, because I know cases where that's not the case. And then you just have, you have to stick around for 2 or 3 years.
I mean, for me, it's very, let's say the wording of those has adapted to the Boehringer style of drug development.
Yeah.
But is very natural, and it's the thing that we want to do.
Exactly. So it's really the sort of the impact that you want to have as a team is basically linked to that performance. Yeah, exactly. It is the same.
Yes. And this for me, I have always tried to avoid. I think you need an alignment. I mean, like monetary success and reaching targets to go to the patient. Yeah. It must be the same. If someone makes money while the technology is not successful or it has a difficult time, this is rubbish. There needs to be a perfect alignment between incentivization and that, I mean, we have kept throughout, because you cannot, I think if you set the wrong incentive, it's going to go the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I still feel the incentives we have is very natural. That's why I forget about it, because I can focus on what I really care about. Yeah. And I know it's the same than what is written somewhere, but I don't need to recall.
Yeah. That's a real perfect example on how to do it. And the other way is basically don't put any incentives or performance there. You just have to stick around. That's a recipe for disaster, because you kill all motivation of
I think the people need to be able to achieve certain. I mean, if you're entrepreneurial, you want to achieve.
Yeah, you want to do stuff.
I mean, we're convinced about the technology and we want to get somewhere with it. And me as Simon, I wanted the deal to be better able to execute.
Of course.
And now we are. And this is great. But if it would not be the case, we feel we just slow down or it's all political. I mean, that's a big frustration. Then I think I understand. Or if you have the feeling people take care of it, you have no say. Stay there in Basel, be silent. I mean, it must be very frustrating. But I think that in the due diligence, you have so much exchange, and probably you should sense.
There you feel it, right?
You must sense. Probably it's very difficult if the numbers are so high that it's very difficult to refuse. Yeah. But at least I would have tried my best in that case to convince or tend to find. It's like with investors. I mean, before I was going out to find investors, and we had people that treated us with so much respect. They were so kind, polite. They knew so much better than we did, and they had trust in us. And then some people treat you with disrespect. Yeah. And I have always tried to circumvent those. I much rather go out 100 more times, speak to other people, try to find investors elsewhere if I had the feeling it's not a good fit. Yeah. And for me, with the acquisition, I would have tried the same. So I think we were lucky that with the initial picks, we were landing right. But I would not have been shied away from the efforts to go elsewhere and do more BD.
Of course, yeah. I feel your gut feeling as a founder is a really, really strong thing to rely upon in that moment.
It is.
I remember, I'm not going to name the name, but I also, when I went through one of the acquisitions, I felt it immediately. I had a 1 hour meeting and it drained all my energy for like a week. Mm-hmm. So there I knew, great, we can sell, no problem. But once it's over, I will leave. I cannot continue working there.
Yeah.
That was okay. It turned out well in the end, but I had to leave, and I'm really happy I did that, because the gut feeling would not have aligned.
No, I feel it's a lot on the way people meet you. And I think there is tremendously successful and smart people that manage to meet young founders with a lot of respect and a smile.
Yeah.
And on the same height.
Exactly.
And there is other people that there is so much disrespect and arrogancy that, I mean, they may be very professional, good, but for me that just felt
it's just
like
not a fit. Yeah,
will be very difficult. I mean, also being aware about how I am. I know that then I'll get pissed.
Yeah,
it will not keep me happy. Yeah? And then
it's a bit like this perfectly, like very well performing employee that is just not a good culture fit. Mm-hmm. You have to let go of them. Yeah. You cannot have them around, even though they perform very well, but it will really hurt your culture in the short and especially in the long run.
And so for that, I think that's why I say I had high expectations about Boehringer, but it was still lower than where we landed. And I think there is so much understanding for what makes us function, and that I feel is, it really is not on purpose, it's well thought through. There is a good personal connect. There is respect. I mean, we have tasks to deliver. I mean, sure. I would ask us the same. I ask myself the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we're there. We get up in the morning. We work hard because we want to achieve. Yeah. And if we miss treating more patients, doing better things, I'm disappointed by myself, by us. Sure. And then that others will be disappointed. I understand. Yeah. I share that feeling. So we do all the best that we don't end in that corner. Yeah. We press on.
Yeah, I love that. So now I also want to talk about the future. So the acquisition completed successfully. You're in the middle of the successful integration. What are the next milestones? Where do you want to go together now as 1 + 1 = 3 or even more?
I think it's clear that, for the technology and for the products, it has to go ahead. I mean, we want to have more products out. We want to get with the one that is in clinical trials. We want to push it ahead. So I think that there the goal is fairly clear. Yep. And so we also stay ambitious.
And in the future, I know that might be a bit too far in the future, but could you imagine building another startup yourself?
It's a tough one for the moment to answer, because I still have so many things I want to achieve with T3.
Of course.
But what I can say is that if I look back the last 12, 13 years, it has been an amazing journey. And now let's say I'm more aware of how long it takes, what kind of a team, how well you need to collaborate over many years. I mean, I was lucky with Christoph that over more than a decade we collaborate so well, still we do, and that you need a robust technology. So I think it's sure that the next time I would scrutinize way more to make sure that it's worth all these 10 years. I mean, last time we just were stumbling into it, it felt all great, and it was. And now I think if I stumble again into something and I have achieved my aim, so there is, I just know it takes years and full dedication. Otherwise, you better don't start. Yeah. And I would only do it if I'm ready for full dedication for a decade, and the technology and the team is worth it, then sure. It's the best way to spend your lifetime. Huh?
Of course, I fully agree. Now, to wrap up the episode today, I also have some rapid fire questions for you. I'm going to either give you different options to choose from or a short question you have to answer in maximum 1 sentence.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
What's your fondest T3 memory so far?
Very early on, we tested one of our clonings in the lab, and we went even too late to look at it, and it was just all working so brilliantly that it was kind of amazing. That was the first time we saw, oh my God, it works really well.
Wow, sounds amazing. What is the biggest lesson that entrepreneurship taught you?
I believe I have no special capabilities. I'm a very mediocre guy. And entrepreneurship has taught me that with steadiness and full reliability, you can go very far. And that for me has been unexpected.
I like that. When you make or made decisions at T3, how did you sort of know that you were on your right track? Was it mainly gut feeling?
I would say I have the ambition always to rationalize, to look at the data jointly again, to verbalize, and then I think to acknowledge that there is a certain part of gut feeling that may drive decisions, and also to let that be a part of the entirety of the decision making.
Yeah. If you could change anything about your journey, is there something that you would do differently today?
I mean, bottom line, there would be only details and like tech stuff that, of course, we have learned on the path. I just hope that, as I said, we had the investors and now Boehringer that they back us so well. And I just hope that the people have sensed and still sense all the way that I'm very grateful for that. I don't take it as a given. And usually, in the PC every day, you sometimes forget about saying or you miss the opportunity. And so I hope that those people that have essentially contributed with their way of being and that they do know, and that I think that we have a payback in terms of real patient outreach in the future.
Absolutely. Which brings me to the last question for you today. What still motivates and drives you? Why do you get up in the morning, basically?
I mean, that's the cool thing. It's the same than it was at the very first day. It's like a new technology. We saw in the lab it's working. Now we want to get it to the patients. It's the same. That's the same. Now there is more complexity. There is more opportunities. But that's the same. I stumbled in an academic lab over a technology that I saw was powerful. Get it out, get it forward. And that's the bottom line of whatever we do. Wonderful. It has always been.
That's the best way to end this episode. Simon, thank you so much for your time. All the best with the integration and reaching the full potential, and we'll be cheering from the sidelines.
Cool. Thanks, Ivan.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.